Good morning, and thank you all for coming. My name is Daniela Mayer, and I am very happy to welcome you to the first event of our two-day symposium, A Sense of Place. In September 2019, a group of 12 graduate students from the Departments of Art and Art History at Hunter College traveled to Dakar, Senegal, to study with internationally renowned curator Koyo Kouoh and the incredible team at Raw Material Company, a nonprofit art center offering research and residency programs for artists and curators alongside seasonal exhibitions, publications, and lectures. The focus of our time in Dakar with Koyo was centered on how curatorial practice can make the presence of a place visible, which in her words focuses on the question, how have actors active in our local context and from across the creative disciplines responded to and shaped their or our environment? We returned to New York with this question in mind, and in partnership with Koyo and Raw Material Company, organized a symposium of programming, which was originally scheduled for March 2020, but was ultimately postponed due to global pandemic. Since that time, the question of place seems more relevant than ever. Presented now in an online format, our symposium considers gentrification and displacement, infrastructures of surveillance, and sustainability as they relate to how artists see themselves shaping and being shaped by their immediate environments. We're kicking off the symposium with today's studio visit and discussion with Johannesburg-based artist Billie Zangewa, who hand stitches raw silk embroideries that take inspiration from contemporary life. We also have Koyo Kouoh, founding artistic director of Raw Material Company and executive director and chief curator of Capetown Zeitz Museum of Contemporary Art Africa. And finally, Malanya Graham, a multidisciplinary artist and former MFA candidate at Hunter College, as well as the founder of Taurus Moon Lab, LLC, a creative production company that contributes to the legacy of artistry at the forefront of social change. A special thanks to Malanya for organizing this event together. We also like to extend our deepest gratitude to Arthur and Carol Kaufman Goldberg, who support the Goldberg Curatorial Workshop Program at Hunter College, and the team at Raw Material Company, Marie-Helene Pereira, Dulcie Abrams-Altus, and Devin Hens. Finally, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge that Hunter College is located on the unceded ancestral land of the Lenape and Munsee peoples, past and present. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the program.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, Koyo. Hi, Billie.
Hi, Malanya. Hi, Billie.
Hello. Thank you for being here this morning. How are you feeling?
Excited. Happy to see Billie again.
I know, it's been ages. You look just like I remember.
Oh, yeah, this is a sort of reunion for you both.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share with the audience why you two are together for this symposium. Koyo curated a show named Body Talk in 2016, and I'll share a little bit of information about that. So the name of the show was Body Talk, Feminism, Sexuality, and the Body. And Billie had a couple of pieces in that show. One was called The Constant Gardener, made in 2014, and the other was The Rebirth of the Black Venus, made in 2010. So I wanted to open up the conversation and talk about that experience of curating for you, Koyo, and the theories and ideas behind that show, and Billie, your experience being in that show, and how you perceive that now with your most recent show at Lehman Maupin called Wings of Change. So,
well, we should start. Maybe I should start.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
To contextualize a little bit the premise of that show. Melania, first
Definitely.
of all, thank you for organizing this. This is fantastic against all the odds that this seminar had to face over the past 15 months.
Year and change, right?
So it is wonderful, and for the joy of bringing me back with one of my favorite artists. So it's really nice to have this time with you this afternoon. Well, Body Talk was an exhibition that I conceived, wow, that's quite a while ago, because the show was put together in 2015. It started in Brussels, and then it went to Metz in France and to Lund in Sweden. Basically, when I was invited to curate a show at Wils in Brussels, I was really, I've been over the time of my practice, I've always been very interested and very dedicated and devoted to female artists. However, I never really sort of, how can I put it in understandable words? I never really put the women or the feminism flag on my head, so to speak, you know, because I just feel that my sensitivity, my curatorial interest is wide, and even though it is, my heart is very clearly always with women, but I'm one of those curators who still believe that artistic practice is a spirit, and is a spirit that doesn't have a gender particularly. However, I am very sensitive and very concerned and very close to female biographies, regardless of the background. And of course, as an exhibition maker, I am very close to female practices. And when I was thinking of that show, and back then I have never curated the show with solely female artists. So I wanted to tackle that sort of format of curatorial practice and of exhibition making. And also because the 6 artists, amongst which Billie, who I invited to participate in that show, have really produced and worked around thematics that are close to me, and that also have a very fundamental social relevance, particularly in the environments of our African societies, regardless of the country on the continent. So body, feminism, and sexuality, these are very loaded themes of thinking, but also frames of living, and also frames of practice, of course, for many artists. And it was for me also an exercise in trying to read those practices of these 6 artists comparatively. So there was Billie Zangewa, Tracy Rose, Marsha Kure, Sonia Kiambi, Valerie Oka. Who am I forgetting, Billie? I always forget one person. Always forget one person. I'm trying to go through the exhibition space to see.
I have the list right here.
Yeah.
You said Marsha Kure, Miriam Kiambi, Valerie Oka, Tracy Rose, Kulika Budela.
Voila, Zulika Botella, of course. Yeah. Okay, and so to look at their work and how they deal with these themes, how they translate the body as a site. I mean, we all know that the female body is a site of many things, and including a site of crime. Through the latest statistic, every 3 minutes, there is a crime committed on the female body globally. How to deal with the idea of feminism, because we are all of a more or less same generation, more or less 5 or 10 years apart. And also how they handle sexuality as an artistic material. And all these things are matters of artistic production. So, and from my practice, I really develop relationship with artists in a kind of durational conversation. So it was not the first time I was working with Billie. It was not the first time I was working with Tracy. It was not the first time I was working with Marsha and Zulika and everybody else who was in the show. And I also wanted to give the artist the opportunity as much as possible. Each time I make an exhibition with artists, I also want to give them the opportunity to produce new works, which is one of the major kind of, how do you say, gain, if you want, for an artist in terms of collaboration. So this is how it started, and I think that the show was extremely successful. I didn't expect that, I have to honestly say, and it sort of hit a nerve or a pulse 6 years ago. And I certainly believe that the themes that we were dealing with are intemporal, are timeless themes. This is an endless conversation. Kind of every generation of women on the continent has to sort of find their own contribution to that kind of endless conversation. And I think that we are a generation of women now in our ages of the 21st century who really have benefited of a lot of what our foremothers and foresisters have done for us, yet there is still so much to do. So much to do, and particularly when Billie and I are now speaking from South Africa. I mean, the situation of gender-based violence and female exclusion in society in general is where it is quite appalling. I really can say it like that. So projects like that are immensely important, because I strongly believe that we participate in making society through different languages. And when I say languages, I don't necessarily mean Zulu, Xhosa, or French or English, but I mean kind of creative languages, intellectual languages, emotional languages, you know, that we can create and put forward.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing I really admire about both of your work is that it's usually centered around social justice, meaning, you know, around gender violence, the perception of women's bodies, feminism, and just the idea of the gender stereotype around feminine people. So I wanted to ask Billie, in regards to what you were saying with your experience curating, Billie, what were your ideas around being involved and invited to this show? Had you been in shows like this that were similar, with a similar mission? And out of curiosity, I wasn't aware that, Billie, that you like to commission artists for shows, you know, give them opportunities to make new work. So were any of your works in that show new or commissioned?
Yes, they were actually.
Yeah.
So the immortalization of the Black Venus, she had been made before, but you know, her moment was coming. Was waiting for Koyo so that she could become a goddess as she was meant to be. The two works that I made were actually made for the show. And if you have a look, so there were 3 works. So there was The Rebirth of the Black Venus, there was Exquisite Fantasy, which is where I'm kind of sitting in an kind of like garden with my car in the city in the background. So I'm just trying to find a moment for myself. And then there's another work called The Constant Gardener, and I'm in the garden, you know, picking spinach and stuff. And it kind of speaks to, you know, a primal thing that happens to a woman when she becomes a mother. You feel connected to the earth, you feel more powerful than you've ever felt in your whole life. So the interesting thing about the rebirth of the Black Venus was that I was a maiden, so to speak, and that I hadn't had a child. And then the other two works was, you know, a mother with a young child, and all of the kind of experiences that I was having with this child, now having come to change my narrative. So I don't know, you know, when I look back on it, you know, it was very, very meaningful as well, because when I made the rebirth of the Black Venus, I had just, you know, I'd struggled in my life to find out who I was. I think it happens to everyone when you're young. So I was looking outside for affirmation, and I was wanting approval from others to lead me, you know, along my life path. But at some point I realized, you know, that I was just hitting a brick wall. You know, I didn't really understand that I should be looking within, that I should be asking what I want, where I'm going, you know, who I am, and what kind of things about myself I affirm, and what kind of things about myself I would like to do better at and to, you know, to grow in. And so I made that work to say, I've come to this place of self-awareness and have made the decision that I'm going to love myself unconditionally, and that it's going to be about me. And so, you know, then a few years later, and I have a child, and it's not about me anymore. But it was really the beginning, I think, of my creative journey, because I stopped looking on the outside to see what the world wanted from me, and just realized that there was just this really powerful thing in just telling the daily life of a Black woman in our time. It really felt like, to me, that that story wasn't being told, that it was always some kind of a myth, you know, or like fantasy, or and this was just really just humanizing.
Sorry.
I guess.
It's okay, Malanya.
Everyone,
This is
that's
good.
my kitten. Right, we're at home.
Everything is
Put
possible.
that all in the center. Also, you know, it just brought me to really question myself. And at the same time that all of this was happening, Koyo, and you know, it was really funny when I came to Brussels, and you were like, come and see me in my room. And I was like, what's going on? Because what had happened was that my father was sick and he was dying. And I didn't want to come to Brussels. And he said, you have to go. He said, don't worry, I'll be here when you get back. So it was really hard for me. So I came, but I wasn't really all there. You know, I didn't see what was happening. And even when Koyo was like, come to my room, let's talk, I didn't get it. And it was like, I don't know, it was kind of surreal to be losing someone you love, but also coming into yourself as an artist. It was a very tricky moment in my life. And actually, it's very interesting how life operates that way, that you've got this like inner struggle, but then the universe, the doors for me just saying, you know, this feels important. You know, it might seem mundane, but it really does feel important to share, and vulnerability.
I'd like to jump in very quickly, Malanya, if you allow me.
Sure.
Billie, you said something that I think has always been important, but I think that after this pandemic here that we've been through, and after everything that we've seen, it's becoming even more fundamental. What I mean is the daily life, the narrative of the Black female, you know. And for me, it's not mundane at all. It is a narrative that is under-narrated, you know. And I think, and I believe that the more Black female artists really embrace that space that sort of, you know, seem not relevant, trivial, uninteresting. It is a space, it's a very important space of creation, first of all. And it's also a very important space to occupy, because it is exactly that space that has been denied to us and continue to be denied to us. You know, we should absolutely not be blinded by the fact that, you know, we are a different generation and that we are occupying important positions, or some of us are visible, and so on. The job is not done at all. And
No.
I think that those narratives are absolutely interesting. And I also, and this is exactly why I think that your work, Billie, is so fundamentally radical. I've already written about your work as radical. And some people always ask me, what do you find radical in that work? I think exactly, you know, the radicality, this idleness, this Black female joy, this privacy, this idea of that a Black female can have the kind of life that you represent throughout your oeuvre becomes extremely political for me.
Yes, and also there's a humanizing as well. You know, as I was saying before, you know, the female Black form has always been either exploited or, you know, it's, you know, like we are, what's the incubators? You know, it's kind of like a lot of people don't realize how intense it is to be a Black female. And that humanizing element. And when I was doing it in the beginning, I truly believed my critics, you know, Koyo. I was like, maybe I don't have anything powerful to say. Maybe my work isn't that interesting. But one day the penny dropped and I said, you know, this is the reason for my existence. This is a reason why my mother was an oppressed, poor, Black South African who experienced apartheid. I needed a witness of how bad it can be for a Black woman. And then I needed to carry a torch for all the women of my mother's generation who didn't have the possibilities of education, you know, and interacting with people, and also understanding that there is an internal power that one can access to deal with the struggles of being born in this particular form of humanity. Yeah.
I think I really relate to what you're saying, Billie, in the transition between, you know, like seeing validation or getting validation, or being gaslit by, you know, the world at large about the importance of your work, the importance of your life in general. And then, you know, having a turning point where you're validating yourself and you believe in yourself and you're making your work. I wanted to know, Koyo, like, did you have a similar experience when you're curating, when you started curating shows? Was there a point where you didn't believe in yourself? Like, was there, like, what exactly was your turning point where you said, you know what, I'm going to make a show with all Black women, and even though I may get some pushback, it's very important that the world see that?
Well, you're asking multiple questions in one. So I think that I'm a bit of a different kind of animal. I think that I was very lucky in the sense that I was raised by two old women, my great-grandmother and my grandmother. So, and both were exceptional women, both non-educated in the Western sense of education, but extremely intelligent women and extremely caring and hardworking women. So I really and I really like to reference them because I think that they gifted me with something which is, I have a bit of too much, which is self-assurance. That doesn't mean that I never doubt. Of course I doubt like anyone else. But once I've made up my mind about something, I just move on because I've been lucky in my professional trajectory because I've had extremely good mentors, and one of them always told me, just do your thing, just that. And that is so powerful as an advice, you know, just do your thing. So I think that with that in mind, my journey into curatorial practice is again a kind of non-typical journey, because I was slated to become a banker or whatever, someone in finance, but at some point I bifurcated into the arts. So for me, it's really that spirit of these two women who raised me and who showed me without a lot of theory, without a lot of, fuss, what it means to be a Black woman. And who also gave me the strength to develop and to carry that strength with me, and also to share that strength, because as I said before, my dedication to the work and to the promotion of young Black females on the continent is number one. I mean, for instance, at Raw Material Company, we only employ women. There are no men, but it is not necessarily programmatic. It's something that just became like that, and it
happened organically.
It doesn't surprise me either. So just to answer you, I think that it is very important for Black females to really reconnect with that core strength that we have. I mean, if you look at the entire human evolution and development, I mean, the first human was a Black woman. So it is, and it's not Koyo who's speaking, it's science who's telling us that, So, and I believe that through, comment on peut dire ça, through history and through the events of history and how the African continent has been treated, there is so much that is transmitted. And I say this as a post-independence, 21st century, highly knowledgeable, independent Black women. But we are still sort of carried by that transmission. And those chains are not completely broken yet. And the work of people like Billie and other artists that I admire are essential in that translation, are essential in moving forward, the status of Black females.
Thank you. At this point, I wanted to remind the audience that there is a question and answer box, so feel free to drop some questions there, and then we'll address them in maybe another half an hour while we continue talking to the curator and the artist. So my next question, I wanted to bring up this piece, Billie, that you made called Ma Vie en Rose. Thank you. So taking a look at that piece, which is absolutely beautiful, I wanted to read something that you said, Billie, about this piece and others that you had in the Lehman Mountain show. So, quote, "I feel that we are isolated from each other, going through triumphs and struggles alone, and in my work, I look to find that connection for myself by sharing experiences that we've all potentially had and can relate to. I also think there's something beautiful and poetic in the ordinary every day, and I enjoy exploring that. Each work is left with frayed edges and empty areas to enable the viewer to complete and therefore be involved in the narrative." I wanted to know if you could expand on that specifically in this piece and any other piece you wanted to speak about. Just maybe answer the question, how do you feel trying or making these images of daily life, although it is universal, the idea that womanism is specifically for Black women and women of color, how do you feel that images like this contributes to universality and therefore moving forward justice for women?
Well, I think, first of all, there are lots of women doing this right now, or at 5 a.m. anyway, somewhere. Somewhere it's 2 a.m. or 5 a.m. and your baby needs milk and you stumble into the kitchen and you're like holding the baby here and you're like, suddenly your one hand is two hands. It's like this amazing, like superwoman moment of just like, taking care of your baby. But actually this was my first kind of like domestic scene as a mother. And this is actually the unfinished version. Koyo, I think you got to see it at 154 in New York. I didn't come that year, so I didn't see the final piece hanging. But this is really the challenges that you have trying to be a creative, but also looking after a baby. So that's why it got documented unfinished. But yeah, and you know, for me, it was also really personally about, you know, the fact that people always say, no, 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 you shouldn't celebrate your baby in public. You shouldn't say, hey, look at how gorgeous my baby is. But all a mother wants to do is just say, everybody, I have a baby and I'm so happy and it's amazing. And I just, you know, I wanted to do that. I wanted to just say, you know what, you know, I'm not going to think about conventions. This is a special moment in my life. And up until this moment, I've been sharing different, you know, intimacies of my life. So why not this one? So this was, you know, this was the shifting moment really from, you know, from just dealing with the self and then dealing with the domestic front, which I was obviously forced to examine because I was at home a lot with my baby, raising him. Yes, and again, you know, it is a Black woman doing this thing, but women of different skin tones all over the world are doing it every single day. So it is definitely a connecting image and very relatable. Yeah.
Definitely, it's relatable, but I also wanted to get into the idea that there is a gender stereotype that Black women can only be mothers or only allowed to be mothers and in domestic spaces, although that's obviously not true.
Yes,
well, I
guess
how
because I didn't even know I was going to have my son. I had him at 39 going on. So and for me, this wasn't what I'd pictured for my life. You know, when I was a child, what I used to do in the kitchen was sit in the windowsill and read an amazing book and escape, because I said to myself I was going to, you know, get an education and get out of the kitchen. So this is a kind of a homecoming work actually, because it's like it's okay to be in a kitchen and be a mother. And also be an artist, and also be Billie, you know, an individual, a person, a woman with her own personal life. And this is just one aspect of who I am. And I'm okay to own it. It's not the totality of me, but it's a part of me that I'm really proud of.
Beautiful. And we can also look at the next piece, Every Woman, made in 2017. Could we bring that out on the screen? So I wanted to bring this piece up because you just said, you know, there are different parts of you that you would like the world to see. So this piece is you without your baby, but definitely still self-fulfilled, you know, standing there, independent. And I wanted to just, you know, get what ideas were you thinking of when you were making this piece? So, you know, what's in the background? Specifically, what you're wearing in the piece seems to be very important.
Well, I think it's really just saying that I have to play so many roles in my life. So, you know, even when I go out to the meeting where I'm dressed up like, you know, a professional, nobody knows that when I get home, I'm actually going to be picking up my son's toys. You know, one would think that I would go and then sit at a desk and do something very grown up and sophisticated. So this is really the grounding moment, really, is that this is my reality. So the meetings, in a way, become a fantasy because it's, you know, because at the end of the day, this was a particular stage of my life. I don't think I'm in that space anymore because my son has grown up. So I think that's what's also interesting about watching, you know, the development of my narratives, because they are now in relation to how independent my child is. So yeah, so this just speaks to a moment in time when I was really struggling between career woman and mother, and, you know, who was I? Was I all of them? Could I be all of them? And in the end, actually, the answer is no, I can't be all of them. Not at once anyway.
Right. I would like to add something quickly, Malanya. I think that what for me also makes the power of Billie's work is this assertion of, you know, independence and control over oneself. And this complete unapologetic kind of, you know, standing in life. And also, you know, I mean, I've known Billie's, this is really a different phase of her work. I've known her work before, which was very much around the city. Maybe we'll get to speak about it in context of a sense of place. But if we spin the idea of a sense of place further, the home is also a very important sense of place. The home,
especially now, yeah.
You know, as a site that for a lot of women is not necessarily a site of safety, the home, you know? So having these visual narratives through Billie's work that really show the possibility of a strong, savvy, beautiful, independent Black woman is a very important chapter in the overall art history that we are all writing. So I think it's very important to acknowledge that as well.
Right. So how has your ideas of sense of place transitioned from maybe a couple years ago to now, especially in the COVID era, especially in, you know, these changes of power in all over the world? And specifically relating to where you are now, you know, I guess sheltering in place from COVID. And we were having a pre-conversation earlier, Billie, where you said, you know, we're not really going anywhere. We're staying at home and then, you know, maybe going outside for necessities. So what are your ideas and feelings around that?
If I
And
may
then, you know,
interject, Billie has always been at home.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Is that what you're going to say?
Even pre-COVID, she is a home stayer.
And it's really funny because when I go to an opening, everyone says, Billie, where do you live? And I say, but I live in Joburg, just down the road. Because I'm always at home. I'm a homebody. I love home. It's like just being cushioned and I love the things that you can do at home. I mean, I love socializing, but I'm definitely more introverted than extroverted. But obviously I like to balance it. So I will go through a phase where I'm like super social. But you know, I'm always the one who's like, yeah, I'll meet you at the club and then I'll go home and take a bath and go to bed with a That's me. So what was actually really interesting for me with the lockdown and COVID was I went, oh my God, my work makes so much more sense now because my work is out there, but now people are at home looking at me in my home. Like it just, I think then now that's real connection because now everybody's daily routine became hyper because we couldn't go anywhere. It wasn't just like you make a cup of coffee, you run out the door and you're gone. Now suddenly it's like, okay, this ritual of making a cup of coffee has a different significance. And I love the fact that a woman's space traditionally actually just, it became the center of the human narrative now because we're all on Zoom in our personal spaces, unless you're in office or whatever. And everything is happening at home and we have to connect with our loved ones. And you know, what was kind of also on top of all of that saying, oh my God, we're all at home now. So, you know, this is my space and my domain. But it was also like when I bought this house, you know, it was a huge debt for me and I don't like debt. So it was very stressful, but I wanted to do it for my son. I wanted to give him a sense of place and belonging, you know, all those things that a mother does for a child. And so for 3 years since I bought the house, all I've done is just work really hard on shows to pay off the house. And so the lockdown actually allowed me to enjoy it. So it's been an absolutely awful, awful time. But I guess the point is that even when I'm at home, I'm not necessarily in the present moment. But now I have had the chance now to say, well, thank goodness I took that risk and got debt because we have a little garden and we've got space. So in this really difficult time, at least, you know, we're not squashed somewhere and then we have to deal with that on top of everything else that we have to deal with.
Right. So when you say, you know, when you need space, were you being serious? It's an awful, awful time at home.
Well, you know, sometimes my son and I can get too close, and then I just go into my room and the door is closed, and he's like, "Got it," and then he'll go to his room and close his door. But at least we have that personal space where we can, you know, and I mean, it's more relevant if you're in Africa because, you know, space is an issue. Some families are living in one room, so that's really the context that I'm working with here. So then I just, instead of complaining about all this debt and how hard life is, I just realized actually how privileged I was that, you even though it was a very stressful thing to get this going, that I was able to do it, and that now, through a very difficult time, I've got a support structure of some kind, i.e. space.
Right. It seems like a lot of people are experiencing that, you know, when you're forced to be at home, you're also seeing that maybe it's something that you needed, you know, to be in one place for an extended period of time to really get your mind together. I wanted to, sorry.
My son has thrived from it, having his mom, you know, in it every day, staying, it's just blossomed. It's been so good for him.
That's beautiful. Can we bring up a third piece, In My Solitude by Billie, made in 2018? So I wanted to speak about this piece, particularly because for you, you said rituals at home are very important. You said you've always loved reading. You know, we were having the conversation before our talk where you make your coffee, you make your tea, you know, you read a good book, you find a nice sunspot. So I wanted to talk about how making your work and living your life, you know, is a form of meditation, a form of returning to your center. And how that contributes to your idea of Black feminism.
Yeah, well, I just feel so privileged that I get to express my feelings and emotions and experiences and make them into this like tangible work of art. And I think that that in itself is a healing, empowering act, that I have a voice and I have a platform, even if it's a visual voice. And you know, I love the process of creativity as well. Just drawing, trying to figure it out. You know, what am I doing? And the cutting and the sewing. You know, it's all meditation. Like I never feel stressed when I'm in the middle of a work. I think I might be stressed when I'm looking at deadlines or thinking about expectations. But when I'm making a work, I go into a very peaceful place where I guess I can say that I'm my purest self. And the thing for me with this work is that it really speaks to two of the things that Koyo mentioned about my work. And one of them is that self-assured, independent Black female who has time for pleasure. So because this is a totally sensual, pleasurable moment, in my pajamas, on my favorite sofa, with a great book and a cup of coffee. And it's a different kind of domestic scene because my son is not here, and he's not here because he's at his dad's on this this day. So then I have morning to just be me.
It's beautiful. It's like this plant is flirting with you. I wanted to just have or say a quick quote about what womanism is or how it was brought into the world. So according to Dr. Layli Maparian, womanism's mission is to restore the balance between people and the environment or nature and reconcile human life with the spiritual dimension. So it seems like through your work, you've been exploring this very idea, and it seems like it comes from an internal space. It doesn't seem to me that it was, like this idea came from books or this idea came from,
It came from actually having experience and going, oh my God,
right,
this is amazing. I have to tell people.
Right. And I would have never known that there was a point where you were unsure of your mission, like all these pieces have seems to be throughout the years to be very strong and have a self-assured quality.
But I do think that when you're a creative person, no matter how strong you are, you do feel vulnerable. I think when you expose yourself, that vulnerability can lead you to maybe a little bit of doubt or something. I think it's okay. I still have that. When I work for a show, I still, just like before I did the show in New York, my brother and my son were talking me off the ledge. So, for me, it's part of the process is to humble myself, Like I can't just believe that I'm this amazing thing all the time and that, my head gets big. I'm human, I'm fallible and I'm vulnerable. And I must acknowledge as well that this voice I've been given comes from a greater power than me. I have to actually also really humble myself to that I'm lucky to be the receiver of this amazing thing that I've been given.
Beautiful. I think that's really important for especially younger artists to hear, you know, like that idea of like maybe you're not doing enough, maybe never goes away, but you know, comes in waves and it goes away, you know.
I also think that
Yeah,
I
Koyo.
also think that if I think it's very important for, I mean, for younger artists, and particularly in the context of this graduate seminar, for you to be exposed to the practice of Billie, because I think that, how should I put it? A few months ago during lockdown, now that I am at the museum, I organized this thing called Radical Solidarity Summit. And the idea of radicality is a very elastic one, but very much in the sense that people think about radicality in practice or in artistic practice, one very often thinks of you know, social practices or very kind of revolutionary practices and very sort of contesting practices, so to speak. My English is not really good sometimes. So what I want to say is that it is really important to see that a practice such as Billie's that uses quilting, if I may call it like that, that uses sewing, which in itself, if one wants really to trace it back, is a very political, radical Black female practice. Our grandmothers and great-grandmothers brought quilting into the conversation or into the society. And that the using, instead of painting, I mean, Billie could have become a painter, but she is using a practice that is so key to narrative, to social making, to stitching together, to keeping together, to really create visuals that make sense for the community, for the society, for, you know, the biographies of African women. So I think that from looking at her work also from that perspective is very important, because it is, for the longest time, it is a practice that has been totally neglected, you know, that was not seen as contemporary enough, that was not seen as, you know, engaged enough. And this proves again that, you know, meaning is really in the eye of the beholder. They say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Meaning, for me, is in the eye of the beholder. And it takes, you know, really people to see the meaning in an artist's work and to translate it for the society. So for me, the very beyond the visual narrative that Billie is developing in her oeuvre is also the how do you say it? How she makes it, the practice that she uses to make the work in itself, for me, is already the base, the fundamental ground of radicality. This quilting, this sewing, this stitching together.
Right. I always thought it was interesting, Billie, that you said you didn't learn how to sew or, you know, quilt from your mother. You learned from school. So can you, you know, talk about that specific process, your materials, and just expand on the first time you maybe started working with these materials and how your experience has transformed from then to now?
Yes.
Because you haven't changed your materials, but I'm sure you changed your relationship to them.
Every stitch,
Yeah.
or something comes undone. But you know, I think a really important moment for me was definitely bearing witness to my mother's sewing group, you know, in our dining room, and there was something strong there. There was a strength. I could sense it. I was like, it seems very ritualistic. They're drinking tea and, you know, eating scones, and, you know, they're all doing some embroidery, but there's something very powerful going on here. I remember that as a 5-year-old child sitting in the corner by the curtain, trying to not be seen because, you know, it wasn't my space. It was a ritual of women. I knew there was something going on there that was more than what it seemed. And I think that the reason that I never asked my mom to teach me was that I wanted to create that community with my contemporaries. So I wanted to be doing the sewing at 9 years old with other 9-year-olds. And that's what I ended up doing at school, obviously under the supervision of women who taught us techniques. Yeah, so I think that was why I never asked my mom to help me with it. And you know, what Koyo was saying about, you know, the sewing being radical and all of that, I didn't realize that that moment of watching the women's group sewing was so important in my life. But then when I went on and became an art student, and the idea of not expressing your identity as a woman kept coming up, that it meant you weren't a serious artist, I really had to confront that and deal with it. And, you know, as soon as I could, I knew I was going to do something that was classically female. You know, if you look at all those classical kind of films with all the English ladies sitting at the windowsill embroidering, whatever, you know, that's kind of the thing. Women sew to pass the time, right? It's not like, it's not going to make you money. It's not this big constructive thing. So that was actually one of the things that drew me to sewing, was that I wanted to prove to my male lecturers that actually this female things are actually incredibly powerful and should not be dismissed, that they actually need to be heard and seen, and that they are sources of power. So that was actually what was my motivation to work with textile in the beginning. As I started doing it, obviously I fell in love with it, and I understood, you know, the many nuances of the powers that it holds. And to answer your question properly, so basically, normally the process is that I have a feeling or an idea that I want to share and express, and then that kind of just marinates in my head for about a few months as the image comes to some kind of view. And then I take research photographs, and then I make a line drawing from those, basically to create the story that I'd built up in my head. And then the line drawing is what I pin and then cut onto the fabric, and then do the kind of applique technique that is my final work. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, it seems like we will be wrapping up. I wanted to remind the audience that we are taking questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be addressing those in a couple minutes as we wrap up our conversation. So thank you, Billie and Koyo, again for being here. Of course.
Koyo and Malanya. It was
Yeah,
such a...
but I think we have a question now.
Yes, we do have a question.
From Julia. Hi, Julia.
Oh. Well, okay, we're gonna bring those up in a minute. My colleague Christina is actually going to be managing these questions. But yes, hi Julia, I see that question. So just to wrap up the conversation, I wanted to ask both of you, you know, Koyo with your curatorial process, and Billie with any new work and the new shows that you're working on for 2021. How do you think artists, specifically Black women artists, Black femme artists, you know, with the LGBT community, the Black Lives Matter movement, and these changes in power globally, how do you think artists can expand and challenge gender stereotypes now, working with, making this work that has been made for a few years? You know, what types of images do you see now that are challenging gender stereotypes projected onto Black women, onto feminine people? And how do you think that has affected social justice movements? That's a big question, but just to wrap up, you know, art, social justice, Black women, what's your take in 2021? And either of you can answer.
I don't know. I think Black women have always been at the forefront of social justice. everywhere, on the continent, in the diaspora, which I found a very beautiful word, Afrospora. And I think, how do you think that can, I just think that we just have to continue doing what we've been doing. You know, I think Black Lives Matter is a very important moment, is a very important movement, which came to highlight, you know, a lot of things that we've known all the time.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I think that the concentration around the Afro-American experience or the American reality is occupying the conversation about the biography of Black female in a way that I think it has to be expanded, you know, it has to be complicated, it has to be sort of more incorporating about, you know, we may all be Black, certainly, and have very similar experiences, and I am one of those who certainly believe that the Black female biography transcontinentally and transglobally, if you think, have a lot of similarities because we are still in a state of perception by others, sort of in the same sort of canon, so to speak, or in the same sort of registers. So I think that we can only move forward, you know, like Nkrumah said in the 50s, we face forward, we just move forward, we just continue doing what we are doing because the struggle is real, you know. I mean, Billie and I are extremely privileged as Black females, but the struggle is really real in the sense that you cannot waste time, no opportunity, no influence, no, you know, access that you have if you don't use it to push forward that cause. And that is a cause that is close to every conscious Black woman. At the same time, I think that the idea of Blackness itself is a very complicated matter because Blackness in Brazil, Blackness in Cuba, Blackness in the US, Blackness on the continent in itself is not kind of this homogenic kind of space of existence. So
Blackness is not a monolith, right?
Yeah, how we can do it, just have to continue doing what we are doing.
And because of the fact that it is so nuanced, if you have a personal experience you want to share, please do, because it's not going to be the same exactly as anybody else's. So use the platform that you have to educate, inform, and connect.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. I think that's a beautiful wrap up now. I see we have 2 questions. And I will hand over the questions to Cristina Barrera, my colleague and fellow artist, and hopefully continue the conversation as the questions unfold. So thank you.
Thanks, Malanya, and thank you.
Of course.
And thanks again to everyone for being here. So we'll be, as you know, and we've said, but just in case you're just arriving, we'll be taking questions through the Q&A function for the next 20 minutes, 15 minutes or so. So the Q&A window is just at the bottom of your screen on the right-hand lower taskbar. It's 2 little speech bubbles. We're going to be taking questions first come, first serve in the time allowed, and some questions might be consolidated or combined if they're very similar. Please respect listed pronouns and feel free to add yours to your display name or in your question. And so without further ado, we'll start with Giulia Pauletti's questions. She says, thank you for this rich conversation. I wanted to ask Billie if photography as a medium and an aesthetic has played a role in creating this series.
Well, all of my work, I think, actually. So I am an avid reader of Vogue magazines, so fashion photography. So, you know, pretty much, you know, Helmut Newton and, you know, Ellen von Unworth. And so, yes, photography, definitely. But for me, just different types of narrative forms have been very interesting. Film is very interesting to me. graphic novels, advertising, you know, like just single page ads, advertising a product, because all of that is, you know, narrative. So definitely photography, yes, absolutely.
And we have our next question from Sydney Shavers, who's one of our fellow symposium organizers. Billie, can you talk about when you consider a work complete? I noticed that parts of your works are missing, which suggests the way our realities are stitched together, quote, but I'm wondering how you decide what to include or not.
Well, I learned over time, and I connected with my inner voice or the muse that uses me. And basically the voice kind of tells me what to do. Because when I first started out, I was like, everything's got to be detailed. But, you know, as I went on, I heard a voice talking to me, and it would say, no, you've got to go onto there and work on the face now. And then it would say, no, don't work on that part. So basically I have, you know, I'm in conversation with a part of me that's non-physical, and it's actually that part of me that dictates the process and also tells me when it's finished. And for me, the kind of the incomplete missing parts speaks to the, you know, the perfect and the imperfect. And I guess, you know, it's kind of like what I was saying before about how when I came into self-awareness, I was trying to be perfect for everyone so I could be perceived as perfect. But instead, I really should have been communicating my faults, because maybe that would have made me, you know, endearing to the person in front of me, as opposed to trying to please them. So there I'm basically saying, own your dark side, own your faults, own any kind of limiting, you know, childhood trauma and the thoughts, you know, that may have accumulated because of it. Because I also believe that every single person on this earth has some kind of trauma to some degree that determines how you react to things and the kind of things that you do and how you do certain things. And also, you know, I want the viewer to communicate as well, to finish the narrative. So to kind of like let them fill in what's missing. And so it's really talking to people on a couple of different levels, the kind of incompleteness of it.
We have our third question from Chris Bernstein, another one of our symposium colleagues. So question for all, while we shelter in place, have you read any books or seen any films that bring up a transformative sense of place for you? And has that affected your thinking creatively in this time?
I think I should go. I'll go first. Hi, Chris. It's funny enough, I think that for a lot of us, lockdown has been an amazing experience. I mean, for my part, it has been the first time in my whole professional life that I've been somewhere for 6 months without going anywhere, without moving, and particularly in the South African first lockdown, which was so rough. You could hardly get out of your apartment or out of your home. So, and funny enough, during that period, I, like anybody else, of course, I watched a lot of films on Netflix, but I also, and I will have to say it's totally trivial, I also watched a lot of these homemaking shows on TV, which I never watched before. And I became totally drawn to interior design, to the point that I'm even considering in my next life to become an interior designer. Very funny. This is what lockdown brought to me. So that sense of place and that sense of home is really also related to, you know, making a home. I am a serial homemaker. I have multiple homes. I have that privilege, and it just consolidated that feeling more. I mostly read, you know, curatorial stuff. So there was nothing in what I was reading that was giving that sense, but it came from, you know, relaxing, leisure, watching Netflix and watching home TV, so to speak.
Well, I revisited some old Jane Campion films, The Piano, An Angel at My Bedside, and a few other films. And I, it's for the first time I realized that, she's a kind of a feminist, because her protagonists are always women, even if they go through struggles, they're the center of the narrative. But An Angel at My Bedside actually informed a work that I made for the show in New York. An Angel at My Table is actually what it's called. My work is called An Angel at My Bedside. I got it confused now. An Angel at My Table. And I just love what that title evoked, just like, an energy, but as beautiful energy coming to sit at your table again. My table's in my kitchen, so the sense of home and that kind of intimacy. But Henri passed away, and I had this weird lucid dream where he came to visit me. I needed closure with him, and I got it, but obviously he'd already left his body, but he came to visit me in my sleep. So I made a work of myself in my bedroom sleeping called An Angel at My Bedside. So I think, that was probably the biggest thing that came out of being still, because I usually don't have time to watch a 2-hour film in one stretch. And that helped to just kind of inform the work that I was going to make. And I baked lots of tart for my son, just to keep his morale up.
Right, we have a question from Malanya Graham. Can Koyo talk about her inspiration to become a curator? What were some obstacles in becoming a curator?
Well, if you know the obstacles, you don't become a curator. My inspiration, I think, was basically informed and nourished by my desire to tell different stories from an African perspective and of African realities. And I thought that, I realized it's not that I thought, because I didn't set out to become a curator, as I say so often. I became a curator out of necessity, out of urgency, So so it was really this strong desire and need. It's not just a desire. Desire can sometimes seem kind of futile, but it's really this strong need to mediate African imaginaries, and to mediate artistic practice. And the curatorial sphere is a sphere of proposition, it's a sphere of conversation, it's a sphere of discussion, it's a sphere, is a space where really more or less anything goes, in the sense that it's an open space for people to engage in, and for everyone to sort of establish positions or a language or views and defend them and promote them. So I felt that I am of the generation who came to how do you say it in proper English, who came to maturity, so to speak, in the late 90s, at a time where there was a kind of emergence, but it was still very, very, very fickle, kind of, not, was still very little in the sense of, contemporary artistic practice. And I benefited a lot to having had amazing people who I could look up to, and who really took me by the hand and showed me the way. So this is how I became a curator. And then once you are in that space, you enjoy it so much, and there is so much, because also our work is really something that is very much something between work and life. you know, and even I saw a question later from someone who was asking about the artist-curator relationship. So, and I think that it is a space that is very, very, how do you say, fécond, very fertile, you know, for social transformation and participating, you know, in the discourse and narrative of making society. So this is how I became a curator. And I actually don't like the term curator. I'm not a curator. I make exhibitions sometimes. And
what do you think is the difference?
Well, I think that curatorial, the term as a you know, generic term that is used now is very much linked to, you know, exhibition making as we understand exhibition making in a gallery, in a museum, and so on. Whereas I think the curatorial practice or exhibition making curatorial practice is much wider than just the exhibition space. You know, I mean, the work that we did at Raw Material Company is very much curatorial practice, but doesn't necessarily always deal with exhibition making and doesn't necessarily always deal with artworks, you know? So I think that it is a term that everyone appropriated for themselves, the way the think it, the feel it. For myself, I rather say that I'm an exhibition maker when I make exhibitions, and now I'm a museum director anyway, so I don't curate anything anymore. I have to run a huge tanker in Cape Town, so there is no time too much for curating, you know?
Got it.
So, yeah.
I'm gonna only
Thank
refer
you.
to museums as tankers from now on. Okay, we have next question from Dulcie at Raw. So thank you, Koyo, Billie, and Malanya. Could Koyo and Billie maybe talk a little bit about the curator-artist relationship? Thinking about the places, physical and imaginary, that we inhabit through art, this is a particularly precious one that determines the eventual space created by the artworks.
Okay, I didn't get any of that, but all I know is I love it when I meet a kindred spirit in a exhibition maker, curator, who gets what I'm doing, but also can put words and some kind of like manifestation to it. Because often when I'm creating, I don't really know what I'm doing. So that's like my other half. It's like the yin to the yang and the sun to the moon. And that for me is the most rewarding thing about working with the curator. The exhibitions are amazing and they can have a huge impact, but it's just meeting that soul that hears you and sees you and understands you and can even give you a message to help you to evolve. Like that's the most important thing for me.
Wow, this is very nicely said, Billie. From my point of view, you know, there are, as we said, different kinds of curators. And there is this one particular curator who is the artist curators. The curator was very close to the artist. You know, you have curators, and you have institution curators, then you have the artist curators. I like to think of myself as an artist curator in a sense that I love artists, even those whose work I'm not particularly interested in. I just love the people who are artists because I think they are essential breed of people globally. They have particular minds, and they also have a particular role in our society. And they use languages that are not necessarily the generic languages that we are fed with on a daily basis. And those languages are important in making us. So my relationship to artists is that I just love artists genuinely. You know, I love people who think differently, who have other ideas, who bring, you know, joy, will bring beauty, will bring, you know, confrontation, will bring, you know, discomfort, will bring all of that on the table of you know, of our society. So, and my relation to artists is very much it's a love relationship. I said once, I was asked this more or less similar question once many years ago, and I was on a panel with another dear artist and colleague and friend, is Kader Atia. And I said very publicly, I cannot work with an artist I am not in love with, you know. Regardless, and people are, wow, what does that mean? I mean, being in love, it's not just, you know, the kind of typical way of being in love that we are used to understand. So I give all of myself into that relationship, and I tend to keep those relationships in a very long period, you know, in the sense that I recurrently work with the same artist because we're in a durational conversation, you know. We are, I am hardly one of those curators who does kind of one-off things, you know. I always come back to you because I think that our conversation is one that evolves, just like your work evolves, you know, like yourself as a person evolve, we all evolve. So it's also for me, a sense of companionship, you know, the sense of sticking together and growing together. Even though, you know, for instance, Billie, I haven't seen Billie for over 2 or 3 years, but she's so much part of my artistic imaginary that it's not a problem because we'll get back again. So this is the kind of relationship that I develop with artists, and this is how I work with many artists I work with. It's a matter of care because I care genuinely for artists.
I think that's all artists want to hear. I'm gonna ask one more question. I think is what we have time for, and this is actually my question. So I wanted to ask you, Billie, based a little bit on what Koyo was talking about the radicality of your practice and how the work is made, to talk a little bit about your materials and the labor of the work versus the labor depicted, but then also maybe I'm always very interested in the history of textile production as women's work that also allowed for freedom and play, even though it's very labor intensive. So I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about that.
Oh, wow. Okay. That was also like a multiple question. Well, basically, when I have an exhibition coming up, my body produces crazy amounts of adrenaline, and I can actually work 24 hours a day and produce work. But for the last 2 months, I have been making a work, and the gallery is going, so when is it going to be ready? And I'm like, you can't rush it. So I think that's basically me going, you know what, like sometimes working for a show, I don't have all the time I need to really just kind of let something unfold. So if I have the time to let something unfold, 2 months, and it's, you know, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time and it's enjoyable and I love it, and I wouldn't be doing anything else. What was the other part of the question? It was a long one.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I was asking about your choice of materials and the labor of making them, not just in terms of time, but like the actual physical work, and
Yeah.
Versus like the work that's depicted in the pieces, right? And it's like all kind of wrapped up in women's labor, and at the same time, it's a space for play and creativity and freedom.
Well, I work with silk, and I say that silk found me and I found it, that we were on this journey to meet each other. But it's just, you know, it's a really, really seductive, generous, giving medium that's also very, very easy to work with. And I love the story of it, you know, the fact that it's a cocoon that's left behind in a transformation of an insect, a creature. So that story really, really appeals to me. But yes, again, you know, sewing for me, it's not work. It's really, really, really pleasurable. I think, you know, the hardest part of what I do is really the pressures of producing for something. I think that's the pressure. But when I'm immersed in it, it's absolutely totally fun. And that's why I do it. And working with the silk as well. It's like sometimes when I look at it in certain light, it actually makes me want to cry because I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life. And also just, you know, watching, you know, just hearing the sound of the needle going in and out of the silk, it makes like the sound. And when you're really focused, you can feel that. And that's also the beauty of working, is that it does put me in that place of power. I call it a place of power, but in meditation, I guess it's called the place of stillness, where basically you can pretty much manifest what you want in that time. So if you say to the universe, I want this, when you're in that place, you can manifest it. So it's, you know, it's really working for me on so many levels. So it is labor, but it's not labor. And it's a labor of love, and you know, birthing is hard. As somebody who's given birth to a child, it's not painless. So yes, you know, I pricked myself, and you know, I have some hurdles, but after all those hours of labor pains, you have this beautiful baby, and it's you know, it's truly an incredible experience. And you know, I think, you know, for me, one of the most powerful things about, you know, the medium that I chose is that I didn't get a degree for it. You know, I didn't spend all of this money to go, you know, for 4 years to get a piece of paper to say that I did this thing. It was literally something that I took interest in as a child. Didn't cost me anything because it was actually for free at school, but it actually became the medium that I chose to work in, to express myself. So I think that in itself is very, very powerful, because actually maybe our source of power is right here, right now. We just don't know it.
Thank
That's
you.
our last question. So I'm gonna.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's our last question. We only have 2 more minutes to wrap up. That was a beautiful response, Billie. Thank you, both Billie and Koyo. It's, I don't see anyone on the screen. Okay, sorry, I didn't see anyone on the screen. It looks blank. So thank you, both of you, for participating in this conversation. Does someone say anything?
Thank you for having me. It was so awesome.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I saw the title of the symposium. I was like, I was meant to be in this, because if it wasn't postponed, I wouldn't have been part of it. So actually, I'm really glad that it was, and then I could be part of it.
Thank you. Introverts unite. So yeah, I just wanted to wrap up the conversation we had about sense of place, a sense of time, sense of transformation, beauty, womanism, Black feminism, manifestation, you know, self-determination, pleasure, which is something that I really, really enjoyed you talking about, and listening to your spirit when it, you know, it says time to rest, time to work. So yeah, thank you, both of you.
Thank you, Malanya. Talk to you soon. Thanks, Billie.
Bye.
Yes, we'll talk soon.
I'm coming soon to Joburg. I promise.
Great. If you have time, come visit.
Amazing.
Bye.
Thanks, Daniela. Thanks, Christina. Thanks, Billie and Koyo. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, to anyone still in the event, I just want to thank our speakers once more. Thank you, Billie, Koyo, Malanya, and thank you for everyone who attended. We just want to let you know that we hope you will join us again tonight at 7 p.m. for a public panel, Surveillance City, examining the urban panopticon from 9/11 to COVID, with Ingrid Burrington, Fabian Rogers, Hassan Alahi, and it will be moderated by Janice Rose. We also have another event tomorrow at 10 a.m., another studio visit and discussion, this time with Linda Good-Bryant of Project Eats and Hunter MFA and artist Simon Benjamin, as well as, once again, the incomparable Koyo Kouoh. And this event is open specifically to the Hunter College and Raw Material Company communities. But we have our final public event of tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. called Countering Erasures. It is a public screening and panel with the artist Tourmaline, Howardina Pinzal, and Aisha Williams of the Laundromat Project, and that will be moderated by Sienna Wilson. Thank you all again and have a lovely day.